everyone. Nice to meet all of you. My name is Dedi Iskandar. I'm the Regional Director for Asia Pacifics of datacenterHawk. And nice to be in these new podcast seasons of what's happening in Asia Pacific. Data center are fast moving, expensive, and a complex real estate asset class, right? At datacenterHawk, we provide deal-based market intelligence via our platforms, which is compiled and fed by our data center experience team, so you can make a faster and a better decisions. Together with me, we have Donny Gunadi, the Senior Research Analyst for Australia and the New Zealand regions with me in the sunny Melbourne. Donny, how are you today?
Very well, thank you, Dedi. It is, you're right, exactly. Very sunny, very hot Melbourne today.
So, Donny, it's a very exciting, I would say, industry that we are in today. And Asia Pacific is right smack at the, I would say, the chip war between the Westerns and as well as the Chinese. Do you feel any kind of changes in terms of, I would say, the markets in the last 1 year? And how do you see this? What is the trends that you've seen in these regions?
Sure, Dedi. Thank you for that. I think looking back to the past 5 years or so, I've been privileged that I've operated in both in Asia Pacific, especially in Indonesia, as well as now in Australia, right? There is a huge influx of the Western hyperscalers, Chinese hyperscalers into the market. Not so much in Australia. I think Australia is still dominated by the likes of the AWS, the Microsoft, and the Google. But definitely these are the drivers behind the growth of the colocation markets in both Asia-Pacific countries. We have both in Indonesia, so Australia, and particularly also other countries, I guess, in that case. And now that we are all talking about the hype about AI as well, I think there are also some activities, some requests coming into the country, especially because I look after the Australia and New Zealand markets. There are quite a number of requests coming out of the hyperscalers, the cloud providers, as well as from some Chinese initiatives to create some sort of an AI farm, for training or for inference, more likely training at the moment.
Okay, great. In terms of the, I would say the key markets in Asia Pacific, here in our platforms, we actually highlighted quite a number of markets, and it appears that the markets grow, or the announcement of a new markets actually getting much faster. Just last year, we actually announced 3 new markets in our platform, which is Bangkok, Jakarta, and Johor Bahru. And I think early this year, we introduced Melbourne, another new market, and many more other markets, right? So do you see that this market is going to be, I would say, much larger than the more mature markets like, Tokyo or Sydney or Singapore?
Yeah, I think for us who have been, swimming in this data center water for quite some time, yeah, we understand that the parameters driving the growth is like, the real estate component itself. And now with the introduction of a much more power-hungry kind of application, we cannot deny that electricity price or tariff plays a significant component to the entire equation, right? So a lot of investments have been coming in to countries such as Indonesia, markets such as Jakarta, Batam, Johor Bahru. Like Batam and Johor Bahru initially intended to be a spillover from Singapore, right, due to the moratorium. And if I go back to my homeland in Australia, there is still quite a disparity in terms of land price between Sydney and Melbourne, and naturally it drives also how fast the deployment or how fast the growth of the data center market is. So Sydney is still currently leading, probably about 2.5 times or 3 times bigger than Melbourne right now. if you ask me whether these markets will outgrow the more mature markets, possible, but I think it will take some time. It will take quite a lot of development, quite a lot of technological advances. Because along with that, if you compare, let's say if you compare the extreme like Jakarta and Tokyo, for example, right? I mean, we have different climates, we have different drivers in terms of, Jakarta with 270 million population compared to Greater Tokyo of about 40-something million population. But then along with that, right now, we have different cooling technologies being put into place. So, yeah, there are a lot of factors. It's not impossible, but I think it will take some time before we get there.
Okay. So tell me more about all these new markets, right? What makes this new market is so unique? So let's pick up one market that you are the most familiar with, which a new market, per se, is not part of those mature market like Hong Kong, Singapore, or Tokyo or Sydney. Why, I would say, demand coming into these markets? Why not just expand within the existing mature market itself?
Okay, I think Melbourne would be a good example, yeah, because if you look at the demographics of Sydney and Melbourne, Sydney, of course, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of market size, is a lot larger compared to Melbourne right now as we speak. But if you look at the actual population, if we use those statistics as a basis of deciding investments, deciding resources, etc., Sydney and Melbourne have approximately the same number of population. So, around 5 to 5.5 million people, right? And Sydney, of course, as I mentioned earlier, land price, electricity price, a bit steeper. Whereas in Melbourne, there are some industrial estates area in the northwest kind of part of Melbourne, which have been converted from an industrial kind of estate into a data center compound, the data center area. So looking at that, I think the growth in Melbourne is more promising, a lot more investment coming in. And then at the end of the day, the driver will be to see whether there's going to be a blocking in terms of commercial situation of backbone pricing, network backbone between, let's say, Melbourne and Sydney. And we also need to look at also the overall infrastructure in terms of submarine cables coming into Melbourne compared to Sydney. I think this makes a big difference in terms of which market will grow a lot faster. So I think Melbourne is a good example in this case. We have seen quite a lot of investments coming in, both from colocation providers like the likes of Equinix, NextCC, AirTrunk. Yeah. At the same time, you have hyperscalers that are doing self-builds in Melbourne in the market itself.
Thank you. I think that's very makes the new market becoming, I would say, unique by itself, right, as compared to the other mature markets. Right? Donny, you've been around in the industry for quite some time, right? And you have also joined quite a number of data center operators. Are you able to walk me through what are the things that people which is outside of the industries, they need to know and get it right at the beginning of a data center real estate life cycles? I mean, what is the thinking point of how data center operators, when they want to expand into the new markets?
Sure. Okay. I get this question a lot, right? And especially in an emerging market, there are quite a lot of private equities, investment companies who do not want to be left behind, right? And there's if I use the current Gen Z term, fear of missing out, maybe, that they want to also invest in the real estate space as well. So when they come to me and ask me the same question, is that I think the number one point is that we need to really look at whether the market itself is the supply and demand of the market itself. And usually it's not very easy to determine whether there is enough supply or whether there's enough demand to drive. It's not very easy because the metrics are usually looking at the GDP, the growth, as well as the population, of course. So what I mean is that, of course, a lot of investments are coming into a country like Indonesia compared to into Australia, because the market will see Australia is more or less, in terms of growth, not as rapid as what Indonesia can promise because of the vast number of population in Indonesia. But then after that, the supply and demand is one thing. Once you've actually decided that, okay, I think this is a good market to invest in, then to choose the site, of course, we need to look at the connectivity of the site itself. Connectivity here can be interpreted in many ways. One is the connectivity to the infrastructure, the power infrastructure, the water infrastructure. In a more developed market like Australia, I think those parameters are usually sort of standard. So it's quite, don't quote me on this, but I use the word easy, convenient to get water and electricity in terms of the infrastructure. In terms of course, how many megawatts are needed, that will be, every region, every market is struggling right now to get the megawatt required. But in a less established market, it's not very, very simple to get electricity to a certain block of area. So the safest bet is that you go into a place where the infrastructure is already established, in terms of water, in terms of electricity. And then last but not least is the connectivity or in terms of telecommunication, because I don't believe in my career journey, I've learned this the hard way. I don't believe a data center can be a standalone data center without the proper connectivity with all the service providers, the fiber optics that come into that particular facility. So the more connected the area is, the much better choice of site that location is. And then last but not least, if you want to talk about the more sophisticated component of today's data center, is that whether you can look into a much more greener power solution. So, whether you can do, if the location is a good location for solar panel, for wind turbines and things like that, which will add kudos, add points to your data center being a green data center. And of course, it will affect your PUE as well, right? The effectiveness, the efficiency of the data center itself.
Yeah. So I've seen quite a number of news where data centers are located very near to the power source or the power stations, right? It seems to be a quite common topic, especially in Asia Pacific, right? For people who are not very familiar with the industries, would you mind to explain why they wanted to be as near as possible to the power source? What was the logic behind?
Well, I think it's to do with if you look at from a technical explanation, right? We typically they want to minimize the transmission loss, right? Between the station to the facility. But then the more practical explanation to that is guaranteed power availability. And if they can actually find a location which is close to, let's say, 2 different substations, right? It will be ideal because then they can source power from 2 different substations. Yeah. In many deregulated countries where power is actually supplied by private sector, it's even much more ideal if you can actually source the power from 2 independent power producers, right? But again, the selection of the location will take into account, of course, one from an engineering perspective, but I think more practically what I've seen so far is that to guarantee that that location is ideal to be sourcing from 2 different substations.
I see. Yeah. Oh, I think that's really helpful for people to understand the significance of the power. Obviously, is the affordability to data center itself. Right? Another topic that I would like to ask is that, I mean, with all of these money that pouring in into data centers for the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, when the data centers booms start to happen in Asia Pacific, right? What do you see in terms of price trends, at least in the regions that you are currently covered? Do you see that pricing actually gets, I would say, it's highly volatile, or is it very stable? Or what do you see the trends that you see right now?
Yeah, this is actually a very difficult question to answer. The reason why I say that is that because I've read a lot of articles that in the US, I think the pricing of the real estate of the data center is actually, the trend is
Shoot
actually
up.
going up,
Yes,
right?
because everybody's now wanted to come into data centers.
Yeah, exactly. But at least in the markets that I've operated in before, I haven't actually seen that. Especially in Asia Pacific here, and in my observation, it's a simple supply demand
Yeah,
principles, right? Supply demand principles.
yeah.
So if there is, let's say, in one particular market, let's say it's a 1 gigawatt market, right? With an available market of, let's say, I don't know, 200 megawatt or something, then one project that comes into the market of a magnitude of, let's say, 50 megawatt, it will make a difference if there are 5 or 6 different operators fighting for it, compared to if there are like 10 or 15 operators fighting for the same opportunity. And I've seen this in more Asian countries, ASEAN, especially in the ASEAN region, is that, of course, they've already put in the investment. And then I've seen cases where prices have just free fall. And it's actually quite frustrating to see that, because it doesn't help anybody, right? I mean, of course, it helps the client. They get to enjoy the lowest price, but it doesn't help the industry itself if there's no price kind of stability. So I think Australia is a bit more stable in terms of the ability to keep the price stable. There is no such thing as dumping or anything like that. But in a much more volatile market, I think people are just doing whatever they can to actually close the deal and to lower the price, sometimes unreasonably lower the price.
But I think that's what makes this market attractive, right? So for our general audience, I would say that to close on this, I would say podcast, data center are fast moving, say, and a complex real estate asset class, right? At Data Center Hawks, we provide deal-based market intelligence via our platforms, which is compiled and fed by our data center experience team, so you can make a faster and a better decisions. Thank you so much for joining our podcast, and we'll see you again. Yes. Bye-bye.